Thanks, Matt, and welcome everybody to the November meeting of the Boston Citizens Climate Lobby chapter. Tonight, we're really excited to have a great guest speaker who's going to talk with us about designing climate policies with equity in mind. And so our speaker is Mary Wambui, and she is an affordable housing asset manager for the Planning Office for Urban Affairs, a nonprofit social justice ministry of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston. Her expertise ranges from preservation of affordable housing assets through property and portfolio repositioning to maximizing performance through capital planning, green and sustainable design, rehabilitation, debt restructuring, and building stakeholder relationships. Mary also serves the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as Councilor in the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, a state body that directs the energy efficiency vision for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She is a co-chair of the EEAC Energy Equity Working Group, and Mary's goal is to open doors of access and opportunity for others, especially those in greatest need. So Mary, welcome. We're very excited to hear your comments tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gary, for introducing me and making me aware of this group. I was not aware of CCL, but now I am, and doing my own little research to actually know what you guys are all about, and you know how the ideas that you champion can be maybe equitable or just, especially as we all look forward towards a greener future. As you all know, Massachusetts has recently passed the Next Generation Climate Bill. And yeah, let me just say from the beginning that I'm going to focus my comments on Massachusetts. It's a place I love, and I'm very deeply involved in Massachusetts energy and environmental issues. So I'll mainly just focus on Massachusetts. Most of my comments have to do with Massachusetts. And I believe that what happens in Massachusetts is also very important to the nation. As you may know, Massachusetts has been the leader in the entire country as far as energy efficiency is concerned for very many years now. Last year, California beat us, and we were a happy second, but we are trying to work very hard and make sure that our plans are equitable and most likely become the leader in this area. So I was just beginning my introduction by saying that you're all aware of the Next Generation Climate Bill that recently passed, and everyone has been very happy and excited that Massachusetts has a roadmap to net zero by 2050, and I mean there was a lot of hand clapping. However, on November 5th, the Department of Public Utilities had a docket. The docket is 20-40. I'm not a lawyer, so I may not say it correctly, but yeah. So, and Massachusetts made a decision. And this decision was regarding a proposal by Cape Light Compact, which is I believe, a municipal aggregator in the Cape. The Cape and Vineyard Electrification Offering was the name of the proposal that was before the DPU. And what this proposal is that the Cape Light Compact was going to design a program that was specifically focused to serve low and moderate residents of the Cape and the Vineyard. And they were going to provide weatherization, heat pumps, and solar and storage. And why is this important? Is that in the math for energy efficiency and electrification, if you really want to reduce energy burdens, and energy burden is the amount of money that low income and moderate families spend on utilities, and it's usually way much higher than for the average household. So this offering was going to tackle those issues. One, it was going to deal with electrification. It was also going to address the energy burden by coupling heat pumps, weatherization, and solar and storage. So guess what the DPU did on November 5th? Massachusetts DPU struck that down on a technicality. So, so this is an example of, we make these huge climate goals, awesome goals, and we are all excited. But when it comes to the reality of how they are actually going to be tackled on the ground, we have not altered our infrastructure to change and favor electrification or solar and storage or weatherization, that the combination of these technologies cannot be really done under the same law. And that means sometimes you may have to look at, to say, you know what, let's just do heat pumps and a little bit of weatherization. But what does that mean to a low income or a low and moderate income person? It means in Boston that they're actually going to be paying about 3%. They're going to face an increment of 3% of their utilities. So, we are all championing climate change is real, but income inequality is also real, among many other issues. So anyway, this was just going to be my introduction. I have a presentation that I'd like to share.
That sounds great. Let's see it.
Can you see anything?
Yeah, we see that now.
Yeah, so I want to talk about being intentional about equity in climate change policy planning and implementation. And this is regardless of whether it's the carbon tax, regardless of whether it's heat pumps or wind or whatever it may be. I am now of the opinion that we need to think about equity, justice at the onset, not as an afterthought. And my presentation today will just be thinking of one policy initiative that has happened that's climate change related, and it's the Green Communities Act in Massachusetts. Let's see. I don't know if you can see this other slide. Yeah. I'm not in the office, so I don't have my cool 2 screens to do this. So, so let's talk for a minute about the Green Communities Act. So Massachusetts passed the Green Communities Act, I believe, in 2008. And this act was supposed to do really awesome things for Massachusetts. It was supposed to increase energy efficiency, resource use. It was supposed to reduce the demand for energy. It was supposed to encourage renewable technology development and adoption. It was also supposed to, reduce pollution, reduce energy costs, increase clean energy jobs. Characteristics of some of the features of the law was that there was going to be a ratepayer-funded, massive program that was going to be administered by the utility companies. So all these are good things, and they had, they were noble and they were moving in the right direction. So what happened? In thinking about what happened, I will introduce you to my neighborhood of Lowell. This is where I live. So Lowell, Massachusetts has a poverty rate nearly twice of the entire Massachusetts. It's like 19.6%. The state is 10.4%. The per capita income in Lowell is 37% lower than per capita income in Massachusetts. The median household income is 26% lower than the median household income in Massachusetts. Twice as many residents in Lowell speak a language other than English. As you can tell from my accent, I originally come from Kenya. And I live in Lowell. So this is a fact that there's a lot of people in Lowell that speak other languages other than English at home. The rate of residents born outside of the US is 68% higher in Lowell compared to Massachusetts. The percentage of non-white residents is twice that of Massachusetts. You may be wondering, why is this important? Don't worry, I'll let you know in a short while. Then let's look at the housing characteristics. What kind of housing is in, what are the housing characteristics? And these statistics, I'm actually pulling them out of a proposal by the city of Lowell, I think in 2018, that was before the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. And the city of Lowell wanted to manage its own energy efficiency program. The law says the program is going to be administered by program administrators. But the city of Lowell came to us a few years later and said, you know what? We want to do this for ourselves. So this is where I'm getting the data from. So 58% of the population in Lowell rents. Multifamilies units are 70% higher in Lowell than in Massachusetts. And the percent of small multifamily units is significantly higher in Massachusetts, in Lowell than Massachusetts. And then the percentage of single family units is significantly different. So it's 37% versus 58%. So why is this important? This is important because before us at the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, when I started serving there in 2017, we would have so many neighborhood groups. They would bitterly complain that they were left out of the energy efficiency programs that the state was administering through the utility companies. And everyone would, when folks said these things, the program administrators would be like, oh no, it's anecdotal, there's the law, we are serving everybody fairly. But the people would come and say this, and here is a whole municipality that says, you know what, wait a minute, we think we can do this better than you. So obviously Lowell's proposal did not go forward because within the Green Communities Act, like it's the law that program administrators are the ones that provide energy efficiency. It's not, it's not cities. So because of the law, Lowell was not allowed to move forward. However, we had so many complaints from Springfield, Chicopee, North Adams, Chelsea, Lawrence, even Dorchester, Roxbury, all these places, people were complaining that they were not benefiting from the state's program. However, Wellesley, Newton, Acton, all these wealthy places that are majority white, they were not complaining. They were taking advantage of the program. So what was the problem? Anyway, after these complaints, let me even show you the investments. This is a slide on investments. So the city of Lowell, and I can share these slides with you later. So, if somebody's interested in them.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so the city of Lowell, so you can see as a percentage of Massachusetts, this is the 2013 to 2015 data. They don't get beyond, the investment is like 1.4. So the data communicated significant underinvestment among the most vulnerable. The data also showed that we had a statewide plan, a good legislation, great dreams, but they were not focusing on unique characteristics of communities and thereby leaving the most vulnerable out. So in 2019, the Department of Public Utilities asked the program administrators of MassSave to have a non-participant study. And these were the results. So the results of the non-participant study was that renters were left out, moderate income households were left out, language isolated communities were not participating as much as communities that were not language isolated. Small businesses, especially in these neighborhoods that are low and moderate income, were also not getting the benefits of being in MassSave, as well as nonprofits. And this is public information. There's I'll share this just in case anyone is interested. You can find it as a report. And this was a report done by utility companies on their own. So Green Communities Act 2008, 2020 is when we are thinking about who are we not serving. Can you imagine? That's a serious injustice. It's a serious injustice. So, and that introduces my next slide, which is about energy burdens and equity. So this is data that's also public, that the median energy burden of Black households is 43% higher than that of white non-Hispanic households. The median energy burden of Hispanic households is 20% higher than that of white non-Hispanic households. It gets even higher with Native American households. It's 45% higher than that of white non-Hispanic households. So you can imagine, you create a law. Yes?
Could you define what energy burden means?
Yes, energy burden is the rate, is what people pay for their utility bills. Like that's the percentage of their income that goes towards their energy bills.
Percentage of income on utility bills. Got it.
Yes. And sometimes there's a university in Massachusetts that has actually been trying to have a really cool tool that even shows you the rate in the neighborhood. So you can actually see in census tracts. I don't know if they have refreshed it yet, but they made a presentation some time ago, pretty cool data. So the non-participant study showed us, that the people who have been complaining that they are not actually being served, they are not. So what did the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council do about that? So the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council formed an equity working group. In my opinion, an equity working group should have been there before the bill was passed in 2008. So that's what I'm really like trying to communicate and share, that we have to be intentional, not to do these things 10 years later. Because, I mean, well, will make a difference, but it would make more of a difference if we started things the right way instead of doing equity as an afterthought. So the equity working group mandate is to prioritize equity access to benefits, ensure equitable delivery goals are met, and has a specific focus on moderate income customers, customers with limited English proficiency, renters, and small businesses. Our agenda was to identify and recommend priority actions, and our recommendations also included workforce development. So what was the outcome in the plan that is currently before the DPU when we decided to center equity? So equity intentionality in our plan was that it had to do with first the process. So we involved a lot of people in Massachusetts, all stakeholders. The meetings were tedious, but it was important to involve people for an entire year, just listening, hearing, knowing what will work for them. And then what else? Restoration, thinking about how will we address the negative impacts of one, not focusing, not thinking about equity at the beginning means that people have been left behind for years. And especially now that we have a new climate bill that is moving us towards decarbonization, it means that some of our communities are not ready for decarbonization, because energy efficiency is like your fast fuel, you know, it's the base thing that you do if you want to decarbonize. You weatherize buildings, you change heating systems, and you can even think about renewables. If none of that has happened in Lawrence, in Chelsea, in North Adams, in North Attleboro, in so many Massachusetts municipalities, then we have to think about how do we address the negative impacts of a policy that did not think about equity at the beginning. We also thought about community control. How do we involve communities in not just decision-making, but the implementation of this, implementation of our own climate goals? And then we thought about community benefits like access, jobs, workforce development, reduction of energy insecurity or burdens. And then we've been thinking about how are we going to monitor and evaluate, and how are we going to bring transformation? So how do these things play out in a real state plan? So my next slide is just about the same thing I've said, that a robust stakeholder process, development of recommendations, incorporation of recommendations. And, you know, the goal should basically be justice. It should be reflected in fairness, respect, care, and consideration for all, and elimination of barriers. What I've seen in the climate change world, we are all very passionate about this work. We care about the earth and what's going to happen to the earth. However, we also need to hear the cry of the poor, because the poor live among us, and they're the ones that are really affected by ecological imbalances. So whenever we have climate change policies that don't take into consideration the really weak among us and the people who are facing many other challenges like homelessness, affordable housing crisis, health, issues. It's like, you know, when the effects of climate change come, they happen to everyone. They affect everybody, and they affect them the most. So if we don't involve all these folks as we try to move away from fossil fuels, we will leave a lot of people shouldering the burden of stranded assets and gas infrastructure costs. So our own little attempt, this is what it has yielded. So we have a proposed plan before the Department of Public Utilities. And this proposed plan includes 136 million planned for enhanced incentives for moderate income customers, pre-weatherization barrier funding. And this is a huge thing because Massachusetts made these plans in the past, but no one could say, this is exactly what we are going to do in these particular neighborhoods, in these census tracts, in these municipalities that have been left behind. So we have a commitment for like $9 million of developing a language access plan and even a plan to deal with, to improve language access support. We have a commitment to 2,100 small businesses, business weatherization projects as in EJ communities. And then we have a commitment to workforce development, basically increasing the participation of disadvantaged business enterprises. Aside from that, one other thing we have is, this is huge. I don't know if the DPU will allow it. I hope it does. We have altered the performance incentive. This is like the cash that the utility companies are paid for delivering energy efficiency for the state of Massachusetts. And don't even let me get into the politics of why they should be paid to do what we want them to do. But that's how it was structured in the law. And so that is how it is. So, but we have tried to alter the performance incentive so that it can factor in equity benefits and electrification benefits and the remaining standard portfolio. Basically, you know, my message is really one that the things that I just shared with you should have been done in 2007, 2006, as folks were developing these plans, not in 2020, 21, after, you know, EJ advocates have been swearing before the council that they are not being served. So my message is that, you know, let us be intentional about thinking about those among us that may be affected negatively, even by very good policy objectives. Thank you.
Mary, that was wonderful. A great amount of information. Many of us, I think, weren't aware of the details of that. And also, you know, I think very powerful in terms of, you know, calling for justice around these types of issues. I'll just kick off with one question and then we can open it up to everybody else as well as soon as I, and my question is, you know, when you started to do this study late and, you know, address these issues and come up with this plan, was there any pausing of the program? Was there any pause in the money going out, or did business just continue as usual throughout the study?
The study took about a year. Business continued as usual because this is ratepayer funds and they have to do whatever they're supposed to be doing. Yeah, business continued as usual. There was no pause. There's no pause with utility companies, and yeah, they have to continue doing what they're supposed to do. Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody has a question, if you want to raise your hand using the reaction. Matt?
Yeah, you had a comment on like the relationship between stranded assets and poor communities on one of your slides. Could you elaborate on that a bit more? I usually hear stranded assets talked about in like the context of like oil wells that, you know, a fossil fuel company owns or something like that.
Yes, that is my latest campaign. I love it. So this is what's going to happen. So Massachusetts has said, you know, we want to be net zero by 2050. And part of being net zero has to do with changing your heating fuels or cooling fuels. It's not easy to have, you know, a heat pump is not a very cheap technology, right? And also the maintenance of heat pumps is also not that easy. You know, it's kind of challenging. So what's really going to happen? If we are going to learn from what has happened from energy efficiency, that some places were left behind, we can assume, we can make a safe assumption that in our decarbonization strategy, the same way. So right now, for example, let's talk about Acton. I love Acton. Acton is really out there ready to decarbonize. They have a heat pump strategy. Let's talk about Lawrence. No, they don't. They don't. What's the difference between these two communities? There's an issue of wealth, there's an issue of race, there's an issue of language. Now, what happens when the entire of Acton decides to say goodbye to natural gas? And Lawrence is left with a lot of natural gas consumers. We will have stranded fossil fuel assets, and somebody has to pay for that infrastructure. That is why the campaign to decarbonize, you may have heard it in many circles, is being called a just transition. It has to be just, because if we use market economics, those who can will transition. Those who cannot will be left behind, and they will be paying for that infrastructure in their utility bills. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a concern that if richer communities transfer away from fossil fuels first, and then there's a smaller number of poorer consumers left depending on those fossil fuel services, then the rates that have to be charged to those consumers to pay for the maintenance and upkeep on the last few years of operating those systems could be exorbitant. My understanding.
Yes, and the Attorney General in Massachusetts is aware of that. They had a couple of think tanks in the summer. Well, I hope the implementation will not leave us at such a place in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Leo?
Yes, thank you again for your presentation. I don't really have a question, just more of a comment, but I just wanted to know how there was a strong parallel between what you've said is going on in Massachusetts locally and what they've been discussing in Glasgow and the UN COP26 conferences. There's this whole thing about how, wealthier nations can make that transition into net zero, but a lot of countries who aren't as wealthy, who will be affected the most by climate change, aren't able to make that transition. And similarly, they talk about how a lot of these policies that they've only just enacted, that they've only just decided on, should have been done a long time ago. And yeah, it was interesting when you mentioned all of these things, how this is being shown on the global stage regarding climate change. But yeah, thank you again for demonstrating all of this.
Okay, I guess that's all our questions. So Mary, once again, thank you so much. I will be in touch. We should have a follow-up conversation so I could tell you more about Citizens Climate Lobby and our policy and how we feel it intersects with equity and environmental justice. So let's do that soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, Mary.